It is no ordinary experience to withdraw from the traffic and involvements of our common life, to sit together in the quietness of the sanctuary, each one of us with his own world of thoughts and desires, hopes and dreams and fears. It is good to confess in the quietness. Whatever there is within us that cries out for confession, and to feel in the act of confession that he who hears and judges also understands and loves. It is no ordinary thing to be free enough within to confess, even to God, that which cries out for confession. It is wonderful beyond measure to be able to share the stirrings of thanksgiving which we feel, and to do this, each one in his own way, with the kind of confidence that makes it unnecessary to custom make the language that we use, but to be able to say thanks to God with no necessity for trying to impress him with our thoughtfulness or to store up some form of merit that will plead our case at other times when gratitude is lacking and thanksgiving is far removed. It is no ordinary thing simply to say to thee, O God, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Our Father, 3 times I'd seen an ox striving to pull a heavily loaded wagon up a hill, the blood and foam streaming from its mouth and nostrils as it struggled, and I'd seen it fall dead under the lash. In the bush and the kloof below, I'd seen bush bucks and little long-tailed monkeys that I loved so shot dead, not from any necessity but for the pleasure of killing. And the cockabeets and the honeysuckers and the wood doves that made the bush so beautiful to me. And sometimes I'd seen bands of convicts going past to work on the roads, and had heard the chains clanking which went round their waists and passed between their legs to the irons on their feet. I had seen the terrible look in their eyes of a wild creature when every man's hand is against it and no one loves it and it only hates and fears. I'd gotten up early in the morning to drop small bits of tobacco at the roadside, hoping that they would find them and pick them up. I had wanted to say to them, someone loves you, but the man with the gun was always there. I had wanted to say this, but I did not dare. Once I'd seen a pack of dogs set on by men to attack a strange dog which had come among them and had done no harm to anyone. I'd watched it torn to pieces, though I had done all I could to save it. Why did everyone press on everyone and try to make him do what he wanted? Why did the strong crush the weak? Why do we hate and kill and torture? Why was life as it is? Why was I ever born? I had a strange experience today that has altered my plan. I had worked with a great deal of care and discipline to isolate what it was that was in my heart and spirit to say about William Blake, and was about ready. And I listened to the 8 o'clock news for these things. I don't usually do it on Sunday morning, but I did this morning, and I heard first about the epidemic of smallpox in Pakistan, and then the mass for the burial of the 3,000 or more people who were killed in the avalanche, and then that group of Muslim men and little child that was sitting on the sidewalk drinking coffee and were all mowed down by machine guns from a passing automobile. And suddenly all that I had been thinking about Blake seemed to disintegrate. And my mind began thinking about life and the reverence for life. And Albert Schweitzer for some strange reason. So what I want to do in the time that I have is talk about that. I've had for a long time a very great admiration is the wrong word, but a great feeling of quiet joy in the fact of the existence of a man on our planet like Albert Schweitzer. And yet I have had my problems in thinking about him. But this morning, as my mind began touching him, I could see him walking across the square in his little town and being thunderstruck and convicted by the statute in the park of this European and the African, half naked, standing, looking up in the European's face with a certain sense of pleading and anguish, and how, by the strange movement of the Spirit of God in his life, he gave up one aspect of fulfillment for himself and moved out into the heart of Africa with the amazing and stupendous undertaking to try as one European to atone for all of the violence of all the Europeans on the African continent. And how I first heard about him, my mind went back to that. I was sitting in my college dormitory and I was reading on the edge of a primeval forest, and I read this, and how incensed I was that over and over again he regarded these Africans as children. And the phrase occurred here and there, and I didn't know what to do with this, because I was living in an environment in which, even though a man was 75 years old, he was regarded as a child, and I recoiled against this. And then I began to see how it belonged to a pattern of thinking. I remembered the British Bishop Colenso, who was translating the Old Testament, particularly out of the Pentateuch, into the Zulu language, and he had a rather intelligent Zulu working with him on the translation, and they came to the account of Noah and the ark and all the animals, and this Zulu man said to Bishop Colenso, "Do you mean to tell me that there were animals from cold climates and hot climates, animals that lived in the water, animals that lived on land, all coming into this ark at the same time? How did they get along?" And then Bishop Colenso, who had been wrestling with a new theory of the origin and the composition of the Pentateuch, but had kept it under a bushel because he did not want to incur the wrath of the Anglican Church. But he bowed his head and he said, in reply to the Zulu's request, "Should the man of God tell a lie to a child, and I began to feel that this notion of the children was a cultural thing, that I must not take it personally, and yet as I watched through the years, this has been a blind spot. I think this is perhaps the reason why in all the years of the work of this tremendous man for whom I have the kind of reverence that I have for few human beings in the world, in a sense, why at the twilight of his life there is no great group of Africans who have come up under his tutelage and who are prepared to carry on the work of healing. If I, as a father, find it so difficult for me ever to realize that my children are no longer children, how hard it must be for a man who regards men and women as children ever to shift. But this must not blind me to the thing that stirred me this morning, and that is the insight which led him to go to Africa, that flowered finally in the phrase with which his life is identified, reverence for life, the recognition of the will to live as manifest in all aspects of life, including the individual person who experiences it, and that life seems to be in a grim conflict with itself, that life lives by consuming itself. And this, of course, may be the raw material out of which the spiritual insight, which has to do with life everlasting, life eternal, may be grounded. I'm not sure that life consumes life, and therefore life does not die. Individuals die. Manifestations of life die. But life does not die. Because life consumes its vitality over and over again. And yet when men become conscious of this, their own experience of life in themselves, when they become aware, personally aware of what Schweitzer calls the will to live, then this awareness of what is moving through them tempers their attitude towards themselves, and it enables them always constantly to be working to try to further and to develop and to make wider the levels of consciousness of this will to live. And as it moves out with regard to other manifestations of life, then the problem becomes more acute and more terrifying, doesn't it? I want to revere life. I want to put my humanness at the disposal of any trapped life that's trying to extricate itself from that which threatens and destroys. And the thing that shocked me this morning as I listened to this broadcast was the fact that without ever realizing it, my own heart had hardened in a way that frightened me. I found that I wasn't moved, except as to my mind, by the spectacle of 1,400 people dying from smallpox, or 3,000 people buried by an avalanche, or 8 or 9 people mowed down by machine guns. This was, I had detachment with reference to this, as if either they were no longer part of the human race or I was not a part of the human race. And as I began to work myself back into some area of tenderness and sensitiveness, the whole world of meaning of the thing that was threatening the very grounds of my own spiritual integrity burst wide open. How can I put my life at the disposal of all the life that is trapped around me? How can my will to live make common cause with the will to live of the person in my world to whose needs are exposed to me? How can I do this without drawing a line somewhere in order that I myself may not be destroyed? And I began to feel then that the identification of my life, my humaneness, with the needs of other forms of life and human life may ultimately cause me to make the great decision that the most significant thing that I can do to maintain and further life is to give up my own life. Then I began to think further about all the other forms of life that are not human. And what right do I have to take them? All the thousands and thousands and thousands of animals because of the far-reaching experimentations that have been done on them, I'm able to enjoy a certain amount of health now that would not have been true if this had not been done. Is there any mood that I'm getting at? Is there any mood that will grow out of my own sense of reverence for life that will enable me to keep alive and not lose my mind, to keep alive a riding, persistent sense of guilt? When the necessity is upon me to do the violent thing on behalf of some larger good that may be redemptive to a larger section of life, to keep alive my sense of guilt and involvement in all the trapped life at all the levels, and perhaps in order that I may be able to respond to the trapped life at the human level. I remember reading some years ago a statement from Albert Schweiner's biography, in which she felt that the Christianity had somehow misunderstood one of the most important insights of Jesus, that reverence reverence for life, for human life, the kind of imperative that comes from that. This is rooted in reverence for all of life, for the sparrow that falls by the roadside, for this or that, for the grass, the flowers. And she said that if human beings can ever do not have a sense of guilt for the destruction of so-called subhuman forms of life, then the way is open for them to have no guilt for the destruction of human life. For she says, if I say to myself, I will kill this rattlesnake because the rattlesnake is dangerous and is a threat to me, the only thing I need to do is to redefine a man as a rattlesnake, and I can kill him in the same way. That all I need to do is to define him so that he is no longer in the human race, in the human family, and then I am free of guilt. How can I keep alive my sense of guilt without bogging down, so that it is always an incentive that drives me in the widest possible dimensions of my living to seek out fresh ways by which I may participate in acts of atonement for the redemption of individual life or group life? How can I keep myself always exercised, that the life in me may not die, but that the life in me will join through your need to the life in you? And this little union is one very creative answer to all the aspects of life that are divisive and destructive. And it may be that this joining of life, my life and your life, is an intimation of what ultimately must be the way and the meaning of life for us all. And the dreamers have talked about this, haven't they? You've seen that ad, perhaps on those of you who look at television. You've seen the ad of some chewing gum, I believe, or something, of a lion walking down the streets in a town. And he walks into a store and looks around and walks into another place, and people are going and coming. He's at home and they're at home, you know. If this isn't ultimately what life is all about, then as I feel it today, it is better that there be no life. There be no life. So, the lion, the lamb, together. The child putting his hand over the hole of an asp, and the asp relaxing its violent intent and not stinging the child. That a man, by private and collective will and decision, and as a result of what pushes up from within him, beats his sword into a plowshare, and a spear into a pruning hook. I must find at the level of my little life how I can do this. That my heart will not get hard, and that I may not be indifferent to the anguish of life. Forgive the weakness. Redeem even that which we regard as good. Our Father, that we may find our way into the order of life. That will joy thy spirit and pleasure thy mind.